I think he is, yeah, he's,
Hello, everybody. This is the town meeting, Town Manager Act Review Committee meeting on December 4th, 2024. We're starting a couple minutes late. I apologize for that. That's my fault. But we're ready to get going. We have one member who is attending remotely via my cell phone. So, Mike, feel free to hop in whenever.
I will, thank you.
So, first of all, we have some minutes to approve. One is from November 6th, one set is from November 6th, the other set from November 21. Now, at our November 21 meeting, we did take a vote to approve the minutes, but towards the end of the meeting, Mike Matvichuk pointed out that he did not cast a vote that night because he was not present at the November 6th meeting, and I really appreciated him saying that. But as a result, we did not have a quorum for the vote on approving the minutes. So it seemed to me the best course of action was for me to present it to all of you again tonight. So I passed out copies, but I hope everybody received them before just now. Is there any discussion of those minutes?
nope.
Do I have a motion?
So moved
Second,
to
Thank
accept the November 6th minutes.
second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Once again, I abstain from that vote, Sally.
Thanks, Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And now we'll move to the 11:21 minutes. And I think I had included them in an email I sent everybody last week. Mike, I just sent another set to you within the last 15 or 20 minutes. Is there any discussion on those minutes?
Sally, I'll abstain on that vote since I did not attend the meeting.
As will I.
Yeah, as will I.
Oh,
So we
So,
don't have a
yeah,
quorum to
Amanda.
vote on those, actually.
Well, we never would, though. If Noah was here, he was at that meeting. Mike was at that meeting.
Yep.
So I guess we'll just wait on those.
Yep.
So who was not here? Mary Beth, Dan?
Mary Beth, Nova, Dan, and Fawn.
Okay, so we'll move those to our next meeting.
Right.
Thank you. And I just want to thank, again, Ann Freitas for doing our minutes for us each meeting. So very helpful.
Yes.
Okay, so next. At our last meeting, we began the discussion of the proposed recall provision. And Mike Trainer, who's the citizen who brought it to town meeting through citizens petition, is here again tonight. Thank you so much for coming. John Jaworski and I had a brief discussion before tonight's meeting. Actually, it was maybe a week ago now. And John's suggestion, would you rather say, John, or you want me to describe?
No, I was just saying that, the task ahead of us primarily is to take care of the Town Meeting Act and the Town Manager Act. And that could take some time to do. This is something, Mike's proposal is something that we kind of hashed out, and we do need to do more of that. But my suggestion is to put the primary work we have to do, and do that first, and then come back to that.
So basically, the suggestion that John is making is that we kind of put the recall provision aside and continue working on the two acts. Any discussion yet?
yes, so I watched your meeting that I wasn't in attendance last time. And so I went back and I watched the select board meeting on that warrant article. And I also watched the finance committee warrant article discussion. And pretty interesting. And really, they expect that we would include this in the Town Meeting Act. This would not be a separate item. Mike originally had wanted it to be a separate item so that it wouldn't be a hot button issue in all of our changes, so that it wouldn't throw off how it gets voted on. But especially the finance committee was really punting it to us, which is literally what was said. And that because we were currently going over these two items, that this is the perfect time because it is about how we govern. So it would be put into probably the Town Meeting Act and not the Town Manager Act. But so I think it is expected, if we choose to favor it, that it would be put into one of the acts. So yeah, so that's what I rewatched.
Okay,
And, yeah,
that's helpful.
yeah.
That's how I understood it myself.
Yeah, and originally Mike had said that most towns have done it as a home rule petition. And Mike of the Finance Committee was like, well, they probably did that because they weren't currently undergoing what we're doing. And if they had been, they may have just put it in. So that's why they, pretty much both boards was like, give it to this committee and they can deal with it. So here we are.
Could I ask, Mike?
Yeah.
Does this, your proposal, does it relate to town meeting members in their elections?
No, it does not. So it's only town-wide offices. Do you want me to go to?
No, that's
Yeah,
what I
well-
was wondering. That's why I see the point, but if
Well-
we're dealing with town meeting,
You should go to the mic.
But that,
and Mike saying it doesn't apply to those people,
It would go to the
then,
Manager Act.
I think it would.
and then it
I
might
think
go
would
to
be
the Town Manager Act,
Yeah, I think
maybe.
it would be the Town Manager Act myself.
but it does apply to the Select Board, which is part of town meeting.
Okay, so that
But-
would be part of that. So we could, so I guess.
Yeah, I don't know where it would go.
It could go in either document.
I just don't know that the Town Manager Act, the Town Manager would have nothing to do with it?
No, I'll tell you where I think it could go.
Okay.
Is, in the Town Manager Act, there is a section that deals with, the elected positions in town.
Oh, great.
And, town meeting, here's town manager. And it would seem to me that, so there's a section that says, you know, the select board will be elected, and that the other offices that are elected are listed. And I think that at that point, after those elected positions are listed, we can insert a recall provision which deals only with elected officials.
Yeah,
So I think that's where it could be.
okay.
And in terms of our discussion, that would be fine with me because we'd take care of the Town Meeting Act, we'd get that done.
Right.
We'd take care of the majority of the issues for the Town Manager Act.
Right.
And when we get to that particular section, then we would discuss Mike's, which seems appropriate.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, if I could make an alternative suggestion. We did engage in a lot of discussion about the recall provisions at our last meeting. And I'd kind of worry about losing the track of that if we put it off till later. I think we can deal with it discreetly because it is a discrete, subject matter, and not have to wait, okay, let's wait till we get to Section 6 of the Town Manager Act before we deal with it. So what I would suggest is that we finish up the town, because I think we're pretty close to finishing up with the Town Meeting Act, address this before we get into the,
And yes, I see what you mean, and I have another reason for agreeing with, that maybe we should move forward on it tonight, is because out of courtesy to our fellow town meeting member and citizen of the town who's done all of this work to bring this act to us and is here tonight for us, I know that when I was on the Finance Committee, there were times we would take our articles out of order in recognition of the fact that there was somebody there to talk about one particular item we were going to discuss that night. And, I was thinking, John, a lot about what you had to say, and I thought, well, out of courtesy to our fellow town meeting member, I think it's okay for us to discuss it now. And then it'll allow us, once we kind of have the shape of the recall provision down pat, it'll help us figure out where in the Town Manager Act to put it.
But I think you're saying that let's get the Town Meeting Member Act done, and then we deal with Mike's. Is that the order that you would see us doing?
It is?
Yes?
Yes.
And we should be
Okay.
able to do
Okay.
that tonight.
So, that's really a great segue for me to say, in the packet of materials for tonight, I've included the Town Meeting Act with all the revisions per our last discussion. And I tried to highlight in red the handful of changes I made since our November 21 meeting. Unfortunately, you know, the changes are a little hard to see when I make photocopies of them. But I could point you to where the changes are, if that's okay with everybody. The first one was in section 4. This is, Matt McTuck, this is of the Town Meeting Act.
Yep, I'm following along, thank you.
So in section 4, you know, we had talked a lot about providing information to potential candidates for town meeting member, right? So I added a sentence saying at the end of section 4, that upon the filing of the signed nomination papers, the town clerk shall offer to the candidates the town meeting handbook as updated from time to time by the moderator and other information regarding the responsibilities of town meeting members. So we're kind of saying, okay, when you submit your papers, you know, a packet of information will be offered, and maybe we can help shape what those documents are gonna look like. But at least for now, we're getting it into the act.
So I'm good either way. I was hoping that it would actually be before they file, like when they pull
they
their
come and pick up.
papers, so that maybe they don't even want to do it.
Well, yeah, that's what we had discussed, when I was saying that, you know, there's a handbook for to
Right.
be a trustee, and I mean, that's
Right.
something that, you know, people should kind of know what your role is first before you take on something, because maybe it's not what you thought it was going to be.
Right.
I mean, I joined the garden club and it wasn't anything that I thought it was gonna be. I didn't know it was flower arranging, I thought it was gardens, like vegetable gardens.
Right.
So I joined it thinking it was gonna be relevant to what I was interested in, and it was nothing at all like that I thought it was gonna be. So, you know, the term of garden club or being a town meeting member or whatever might have one idea to one person, but it might be completely different from. So yeah, there should be something going out when people go to pull their papers so they know what they're even getting themselves
Right.
involved
Do they
in.
even want to collect signatures?
Right.
Do they even?
Well, I'll tell you why I put it this way. There's not, the section in the Town Meeting Act talks about turning in nomination papers. It doesn't talk about
Oh,
picking
Polling
them up.
papers.
oh, gotcha.
So
I think that's more administrative.
it's more an administrative task.
Right.
And I also thought, well, don't we want people to know before, but it's only 10 signatures they have to get. I mean, it's not like we're putting a huge onus on somebody.
Right.
They could come, pick up the papers, or they could send somebody to pick them up for them, right?
No,
Oh, that's-
no, no.
Oh, you
They,
can't?
they have to be
Yeah,
there
you
to
have
sign.
be there to sign, yeah.
You have to
be
sign
there
your
in
name in the
person.
book.
Okay,
Okay.
I'd forgotten that step. But anyway, once they take the papers, I thought that, and reviewed the materials, maybe if they thought, this isn't for me, they could always withdraw their nomination. But
Yeah.
it just seems, because
As long as
there's,
they got it, yeah.
right, there's not language in here about how you go about picking up your papers, so.
That makes sense.
And I understand why, because we would have to add a whole thing about
Right.
pulling papers, but I don't think that this precludes the town clerk from giving it to someone earlier than when they're,
That's true.
you know.
Usually when
Right.
someone does go in to sign up for a position, depends on who you're talking to, but they, you know, if you have questions, then they provide you with the information that you may need. So I would hope that anyone that's going in to take out nomination papers for town meeting who doesn't know anything about being a town meeting member would say, what does this job entail? You know,
I know, you would think,
But-
but we have to plan for the worst
But-
case
Right,
scenario.
and I don't think I did.
but
I think
it
this
would
was like-
also be, I would think, an administrative, on the administrative end. Have you ever taken out papers before? The town clerk pretty much will know, no, this is what the job entails. I mean, and that I think can just be kind of communicated to the town clerk, and I think she's open and responsive to doing that.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay, so
Really
that's,
good.
that's the first change. And my copy, and if you have anything that you'd like to add, the next change was at, section 12, on page 12. And, I wanted to clarify here that, you know, Danvers holds its annual town election. We had talked about switching the order. The language was all futzed up, I thought, before, because it made it sound like the election took place at town meeting, and obviously it doesn't. So, I've changed it to read, the town of Danvers shall hold its annual town election to elect select board members, town moderator, library trustees, school committee, housing authority, and town meeting members, as set by town law, et cetera. Oh, and I added language that Mike Matvichuk had suggested, that the language that says the polls will be open no later than 10 o'clock in the morning and remain open until 8 in the evening. I think that's the time the elections are, right?
So usually 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
It's no later than
It says
10.
no
Right.
later.
Yeah.
Right, but, yeah, but they do open at 7.
And then, after the election, the town moderator shall present an informational session at a time and place chosen by that moderator to inform elected town meeting members about their responsibilities and to encourage active engagement by all town meeting members prior to and during the town's annual representative town meeting and any special representative town meetings which may be called by the select board. Town meeting members are encouraged to meet with the other town meeting members in their precinct and with their constituents, i.e. the residents in their precinct. Said town moderator presentation shall be made available to town meeting members who may not be able to attend the presentation in person. So I tried to capture a lot of the things we were talking about. Go ahead.
And just to clarify too, Sal, the suggestion that, I put on the table about possibly having precinct forums, I know we kind of figured that we would not put that in the Town Meeting Act. Would we do anything with that, or is that strictly?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to put it in, but I think that one of the things that will happen is we will submit, hopefully, our revisions, our recommended revisions to the acts, along with a written report. And in that written report, I figured we could include that kind of suggestion, that we had, that as a committee, we had a number of suggestions about how to encourage a more active participation, and that is one of the ways. I thought that'd be more appropriate in our report, which,
Do people feel that that is a good thing to do? That the forum idea was something that
Yeah,
would be
and
a
I-
good place for it?
I think the line that Sally has in, town meeting members are encouraged to meet with other town meeting members in their precinct and with their constituents is sort of that.
Kind of covered, like,
talks about,
Right.
is an allusion to, or.
Right,
And then
right.
in the report, a further explanation
Of what that could
means.
be, or-
Right.
yeah.
Mhm. How that looks, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll make sure to make note of that. And then the last paragraph of section 12 was really just
Grammatical.
grammatical stuff, though I did want to clarify, especially because the questions by, remember, a citizen of the town attended our last meeting, she had a lot of questions about warrant articles and, all that stuff. So I wanted to make it clear here that the annual town meeting is done in pursuant to a warrant issued by the select board. Just to, so it's written, it's clear, I mean, it really wasn't anywhere in the documents, I didn't think, or if it was, it wasn't clear enough, that the select board issues the warrant articles, even puts them in the order that they're going to be presented in a book. And it is based on those warrant articles that town meeting then acts, that finance committee reviews and then town meeting acts. So, anyway, the next change of substance that I made was in 15, section 15, which begins on page 14, where I try to deal with, we talked a lot about this, about, okay, now what? What's the process after our committee work? And it's that the act to be submitted to the select board for approval, whereupon a warrant article should be prepared by the select board, asking if town meeting will approve this act to update the town meeting act as last revised in 1973 by placing the following question on the warrant. Shall an act passed by the general court in the year 1930 be further amended as provided herein and be accepted by this town by vote of its representative town meeting? If so, will representative town meeting authorize the select board to petition the general court by means of a home rule petition to enact special legislation to adopt this amended town meeting act. And I don't know if that's the proper phrasing, but I took some of it from, well, just as a, for instance, from some of the language in the Recall Provision Act, which is already very stylized and adopted to meet the format that's required. So I tried to incorporate language that I know about what happens next. But this is a section that town council, I'm sure, would look at and correct if I've phrased it incorrectly. And then I just eliminated section 16.
With section, with section 15, just a couple of grammatical things, I guess. I think we need the single quote after 1973, where the amendments to the Town Meeting Act. I think we need a single quote there, and then the double quote after the question mark, I think that should be after the second question mark, because it's all, that's all the question.
Right.
I don't see the first double. Do I? Oh, there it
That's
is.
it.
Oh, gotcha. On the first page, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have response?
Hi Sally, Mike. Excuse me. I'm wondering if a document of this nature is an appropriate place to have a question. I mean, this should be a boilerplate, if you will, for town meeting and town manager acts that should be stipulating process and procedures, et cetera. It just seems like an odd place to have a question, if that makes sense.
Oh,
I'm with it.
well, you know, it's interesting, because something, I was working a lot this afternoon on the Town Manager Act. I have some suggested changes I was gonna present to everybody later tonight. But you know, there's a difference in the Town Manager Act, the way it's been updated and revised over time is by revoking the prior act and having the state legislator do a whole new act.
Right.
For some reason, the Town Meeting Act has gone through this process of amending, where they have all the different years it's been amended. So, that doesn't really answer your point at all, Mike, but the reason that it's here is more for future reviewers of this act again in the future, to see, well, what steps did they take last time? And these are the steps that we took.
Okay.
This was the process that we undertook.
Yeah, okay, that's more clear. Thank you.
So, thank you for those changes, John, that you just suggested. Is there any other discussion on this? I mean, I'll tell you what I was hoping we could do tonight, but just the fact that I'm hoping it doesn't mean it needs to be. I was hoping that tonight we could have a motion to accept this document, this revision, these edits, as amended now by John, as our committee's approval or action on the Town Meeting Act. And then we can just put that aside, this act completely aside.
I don't know that we need to revisit it, but I'd be concerned that if we view ourselves as putting this to bed completely, there might be something as we're working through the Town Manager Act, oh geez, let's go back and make sure we
Well,
got that over there.
Certainly
So,
we could do that,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so just as long as we're leaving ourselves the leeway to not
Right.
saying, oh, we finished that, we're not touching it
Finished
again.
kind of as of now.
Yeah,
But at least then we can turn to the next
yeah,
act, because we've been, you know, it's only been 6 months. So I think it would just feel good, just maybe it's just to me and my nerdy way of thinking, say, okay, that one's
yeah,
done.
we can put it to bed for now.
But
Yes.
but obviously, any of the things we do, we'll be able to come back before we make
Yeah.
our final action, so, anyway.
Well, given that, I would like to make a motion that we accept the revisions that we made to the Town Meeting Act.
Thank you.
Would you include in that motion that barring any additional, you know, like, we can go back into it if something comes up, I mean?
We certainly
to-
could, but it should, the motion should be with John's suggested changes tonight. Okay?
Oh, the grammatical.
Right, and we might want to refer to it by what I've entitled this document tonight, which is the
Town-
revisions per discussion of the committee at its 11/21 meeting. And we can say, and approved, if we do it, by the committee tonight. But that leaves open the question that you just posed, Mary Beth, of being able to come back to it. We could just presume that, but if it's more comfortable, we could certainly add that to the motion.
It's fine with me. I just wanted to cover, like what John was saying, as long as there was opportunity, if needed, to go back to it. So,
Well, I think we could as long as the majority wanted to, which we all
just make another
probably are agreeing
motion
that-
to vote to
To
go back
open it,
into it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it's fine.
So would you like to restate your motion to include the modifications that John suggested, John Almeida?
Yes.
And the version, tonight's version.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion that we accept the document titled,
Further revisions to the Danvers Town Meeting Act per discussion of the committee at its November 21, 24 meeting. We can't use the unapproved yet
right,
because we
no,
haven't
we
approved
can't,
it yet.
that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say, because, yeah. It, with the amendments that John Almeida made.
Okay, and, thank you.
I just want to make sure we've done.
Does that cover it all?
Any further discussion?
Sally, yeah, I know when we voted section by section, I was a stick in the mud on the number of town meeting members, but I'm definitely gonna vote yes on the overall
Well,
thing,
thanks.
knowing that we have many other changes in there and such.
Thank
So
you.
I just wanted that to be clear.
You know, and it'll be interesting to see, will that change in numbers, how people respond to that, right? You know, something that by the time we actually get to town meeting, it'll have been months since we talked about it.
But
But that might be, you know.
their first, yeah.
That might be the big thing. So anyway, thanks for that.
And the signatures.
And the signatures.
Right.
There we go.
Oh, that's right, we changed that to like every, yeah.
Everybody.
Oh, right, every time they're reelected, they're up for reelection, yeah, yeah.
Gonna have to do some good lobbying.
So we have a motion at second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Mike, I heard that. Okay, so, by my understanding, congratulations, everybody,
Yes.
that our next step would be to turn back to the recall provisions. And would you like to just come and sit at the table with us again in front of the mic? And thanks.
I have a quote, if anyone's interested, that Dan Bennett, during that warrant article, what he said. Wonder if this is something that should be looked at by the committee that's going to review the Town Manager Act, and perhaps it should be included in that document rather than a separate bylaw. And given that we have the opportunity to do that, that's probably my suggestion. He thought that we needed something. He wasn't even sure that it needed to be made so difficult, that why not 10% instead of 20%, but that's it. And they did, they passed it unfavorably, 3-2, during that warrant.
The select
The select board, yeah. Mostly because I think, well, 3, I think just don't want it, and 2 wanted it to come here, or something like that. I can't remember exactly.
Well, they did, I know that the recommendation to town meeting, I'm saying it with so much certainty as if I'm certain and I'm not, but my recollection is that, you know, so first the select board sends it out and FinCom reviews it, and the finance committee recommendation was to send it to this committee.
Right,
So
yes.
ultimately, that was a vote effectively of both boards.
Right, exactly, of both, yeah.
But thank you for reading those
Sure.
into the record. I have attached to tonight's handouts the set of edits that John Almeida so kindly did, that we started to look at our last meeting. And Mike Matvichik had made a couple of changes as well to it, so I've inserted them as well. I'm not sure how easily it'll be to find Mike's changes, so let me just point out where they are. In section 2, he has a parenthetical saying, I think this needs to be changed to something succinct. And also on the second page of the red line, the paragraph that starts at the bottom of the page, he's corrected the word "flied" to "filed." And on the next page, there's a couple of things that have to happen within 72 hours, and he's suggesting or questioning, should we put in the word "business hours"? And I think not, because it's a standard kind of measurement of time in town governments in which something has to happen. I don't know, that we can talk about that some more. And then in section 6, Mike Matvichuk's suggestion is that you should insert, so it reads, the incumbent shall be allowed to continue to perform the duties, et cetera. So the rest of it are John's changes. So with that, why don't we get going with our discussion?
Sally, would you happen to have another copy of
Yes.
that packet?
And by the way, I have,
Thank you very much.
there were people who were not here at our last meeting, and I have copies, I have packets if you want them from our November 21 meeting. I brought extra packets. Let me know after the meeting. Okay, where do we begin?
Well, I have to say, I disagree with the amendment or the change to, that it would have to be misconduct while in office. I definitely think that it should not just be relegated to when they are holding office, like, and I know this is a ridiculous example, but whatever. If, say, 10 years ago, I did a hit and run, and no one finds out, except for after I get elected to select board, and then stuff comes out and evidence comes out that it was me, and I wasn't drunk, and I hit somebody and killed them and took off and whatever. I didn't do that while I was in office.
Right.
But it's still a terrible thing to have done, and I shouldn't probably represent the town. So I don't think it should be limited to what they do while in office. But, that's just my opinion on that.
Well, I agree with that opinion.
Okay.
I'll just say too, and I think I said this at the last meeting, another example would be like school committees. Sometimes things come out years later that someone has done, and
Catholic
it's
Church.
never current.
Right.
And that's just something to keep in mind.
Right.
Yeah, my perspective on why it should be limited to things that, actions committed while in office, is I wanted to make this clear that it's a narrow process, and that we don't want people poking around in other people's past to find something, find an excuse, find a reason to jack them out of office using a recall petition. And so I wanted to make it clear that this is a narrow process for actions that are during your term that we think are so egregious that they ought to be grounds for getting rid of somebody.
Well, it's interesting, and I know that that's your position, and I can see the logic, it's crystal clear.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. However, there are times that there's something out of the past that is the suggestion that Noah just made that really should be sufficient if there's gonna be a recall. But on the other hand, I disagree altogether that there should be specific language about it. And,
Yes.
and I think that your initial language was fine. It wasn't specific.
Agreed.
And I realized today, as I was working on the Town Manager Act, that there's a section in the Town Manager Act that says the Select Board can remove the town manager. And it doesn't give reasons, not for this, not for that. It just says the Select Board, by a majority vote, may remove the town manager. And then it goes on to say that at least 30 days before that, they have to file a preliminary written resolution with the town clerk setting forth the reasons, et cetera, et cetera. But the power to do it isn't restricted to certain types of things. They have to vote, and their vote is gonna be based on the reasons they come up with, and then there's a right for the town manager to want a hearing, it can be a public hearing. That's all very similar to civil service types of provisions for removal from office or from a position. But I think that we're better off saying there is this recall provision, and if, what's the number for the first? 350 people first have to agree, whoa, what we're seeing is not good, let's get a recall going. But that's not enough. Then they have to get the 20% of the registered voters?
Correct, which is over 4,500 at this point. Might even be 47 now, but.
So that is gonna take a lot of work. That's just to get the election, and then the people have to care enough to turn out to vote, right? So I feel that just the process protects against it being something that's not egregious.
I agree.
That's something that's frivolous, but that's just my opinion. I'm just kind of tossing it out there for why. I just think that there can be unintended consequences that we don't see if we try to define what qualifies for a recall.
I'm sorry.
I second what you said, and even the first presentation, that's what stuck out to me more than anything else, is that the litmus test that you've put in for any kind of shenanigans that would occur, it's pretty stringent, and it would have to be quite grievous. So I would second what you said, Sally.
Agreed.
Same with removal, Mary Beth, am I correct on this? Same with removal for, like, library director, right, with the trustees? There is no,
Well,
it doesn't say, like, spell it out, right?
no, but they're an employee. So there would be something, I would assume, within the town HR department.
Yeah.
You know, having served on a board where people didn't like the decisions we were making during COVID, lots of folks wanted us recalled because they wanted their kids back in school. Totally understood, but we were living through a pandemic, so at the time, we were doing what we thought was best. When you're just kind of generic, I don't think that's as good, because from watching the last meeting, I did hear some folks say, you know, I don't agree with some of the things they decided. They weren't the person I thought I voted for. Some people shouldn't be in that position. But why? Because we disagree with things? I do understand there should be, obviously, egregious, you have said in the past, would be conditions. I did Google a few different communities that do have a recall of elected officials, and in one from the city of Hanson, or the town of Hanson, they did spell out specifically, and I can let you see some examples of it.
Can you read it to us?
Yep. So, for instance, reasons of conviction of a felony or conviction of the following misdemeanors as defined by Massachusetts general law: domestic violence, driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, the illegal manufacture, distribution, or dispensing of controlled substances, assault or criminal harassment while presently in office, admissions to facts while presently in office sufficient to be convicted of a felony or sufficient to be convicted of the following misdemeanors, and it continues to repeat that for some reason. Also in it, they also had basically if the elected official attended less than 50% of posted public meetings of the board or office for which the official was elected, member to which he or she been elected or appointed as part of his or her elected position during the previous 12 months, lack of fitness and sobriety while performing official functions, involuntary commitment to mental health facility, being placed under guardianship or conservatorship by a probate, corruption, conviction of a felony involving moral turpitude, conviction of bribery or extortion, violation of law. I guess my point is, and this is a lot and very detailed and I understand it, but there are things stated versus general, and then to say, well, we didn't like what you were doing, look what just happened in Beverly. the mayor and the school committee chair, they were negotiating a contract. Negotiating contracts are very difficult. There were two sides to that, and for, you know, one side to say they're not coming to the table and he's not doing this and they have the money, you know, there are different stories. So they were able to file a recall petition and got the signatures less than 24 hours to start a recall of the mayor because the negotiations weren't going well. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But that, I think, from being an elected official, serving on different boards at different times, I think to be a little bit more specific, I would feel better with that than just being more open to.
Another
That's
perspective
just how I
related to that
feel.
is that, were there any things that were mentioned in that about things that are done on the internet?
No, not yet.
Is anything mentioned on that thing about things that use AI?
No, because that would,
So my point being
We
that
don't.
things could change in 2 years technologically, and you have no idea what crimes can be committed in that development. And by keeping it open, you give the opportunity, when you state it, then you've either got to go back, if you have to go back and change it, or the person has done something in either of those venues, and they say, hey, it's not stated in the contract.
And that's just it. So things in the world change quickly. You know, the world's a different place than it was 10 years ago or even 30 years ago. So, like I said, certain things come up. You have, like, say, the Me Too movement, and certain things become inappropriate that may have been okay before. And the thing is, laws don't change quick. So once you do this, it becomes a law, and it's not going to be changed quickly. And it leaves it open, and it leaves it open to the citizens. With 20%, that's generally more than people vote in these town elections.
Right.
Okay, and that's, and like I said, if you've ever collected signatures, it's such a short time frame to do it, that you're really gonna have to have the whole town on board with it. And Beverly has a recall process too, and like you said, they started the process. These are very rarely used. And like I said, you would really have to have the whole town on board. And then beyond that, 50% of the people that go to that election are gonna have to vote to recall them. So that's kind of saying this is what the town wants. This is the way the town feels.
right, and I do understand that, but I also understand during certain situations that we've had in the last less than 5 or less than 10 years, yeah, you could have a whole town up in arms about something. I guess my point is, the egregiousness of that needs to be egregious and not, I didn't like that my kids were out of school for 6 months because the state and the government were telling us we couldn't go back to school. I'm just, obviously, I
Yeah,
lived
so
through a
you-
different
you-
period of
you
time
lived-
in
yeah,
a
you lived
position
through a really hard-
that
yeah.
there was a lot of attacks going on.
Right.
So I just want to make sure, I'm not saying I'm opposed to the ballot, this particular proposition here, but I think I'd like to see some other things in it that make it a little bit more. That's all.
Go ahead, Fawn.
I think I'm in favor of,
Yes, I can hear, thank you, Shelley.
I'm in favor of having a recall petition provision. I think I'm less comfortable as I'm hearing more and more. I was sort of uncomfortable with it, but I think I have the language now to express it. I'm less comfortable with apathy of our voting block be what prevents someone from being recalled or not. I'm more comfortable with having something more clearly defined as what is egregious. I think with the internet capability of getting signatures, spreading the word and getting signatures, I think that it would be more and more easy to get 20%. And I think that there's a place for being a little bit more specific about what would constitute someone to be recalled.
Do we know how many of these have actually been, how many towns have
Mike
done
knows
a
little-
start?
Mike
Okay.
Trainer knows a little
I-
bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I can, so the thing is, it's hard, so a lot of places have offices that work on this. So a lot of this, we're doing this on our, like, I'm doing this on my own.
Right.
But there have been several, I don't have it right in front of me, so.
That's-
But the thing is, it's like Mary Beth's saying, so COVID was a really hot topic throughout the entire state. It wasn't just Danvers that had to deal with that, okay? And from what we can see, I did ask, like New Bedford's going through this now. I'm trying to figure out how many cities and towns have this, but I think it's over 50% at this point. No one's actually has a list. Like I said, I was given 80 communities. I went through and found at least another 12 of my own. That's a new one too. So I think it's probably over 50%. But you bring up the COVID thing, and that was a very hot button topic. It got a lot of people fired up. A lot of people thought their kids should be back in school. All these communities had these recall provisions, and there were no recalls over that.
yeah.
And I'm just pointing that
No.
out. It's,
Yeah, and I understand that. But when I served on that committee for COVID, this was brought up then. So maybe not by you,
Yep.
definitely not. But I want to be careful that this isn't stemming from that, because decisions were made that people did not like. And I understand, but again, if it's gonna be in writing, I feel like there has to be a little bit more substance to state, because what's egregious to me, we understand egregious is egregious, but you may have a different
Level of, right.
of what that is.
Right.
And
See,
then.
and it's so funny because when you had said that, I had no idea that was happening then, because not having kids
Yep. I mean, at
to
least.
go to school, and because everybody was doing their own thing at home and whatnot, I understood this to be from a different situation that was going on with an elected official, that I felt really this would have applied to that. I had no idea it was about,
I think it snowballed into that, and that is fine, because that's where we're seeing, there were certain
because I mean,
things.
I don't see how it could have been used under those circumstances when you're following rules that are set by the state or set by whatever, like, so I don't feel that it could have been used in that instance, even though people were threatening or saying that if we had it, they would have tried to use it. I don't think that legally they could have, because the guidelines were such that as a school committee, you were doing what the state was telling you
We
to
weren't
do.
making wasn't being made up out of
Right,
our own
right,
personal
exactly,
feelings.
Exactly, so that's why I
So,
feel like in that
but-
instance, it couldn't have even been used. I just feel it was a horrible time for you guys
Yeah.
on the school committee in general,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But I mean, I guess, sorry, Fawn, just one other, just
Did you
wondering
say-
if there's more that can
Did you
be.
ask your question yet?
Oh, I don't have
Put
a
into
question,
it.
I just
Oh.
wanted to add my thoughts. I mean, I think trying to come up with a laundry list of these items I think that's an exercise in futility, because there's always gonna be something, like you said, something in the
Yes.
future, or something that we just didn't think of.
Right. And
But at the same time.
unfortunately can tie your hands against something you just
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
anticipate.
because now we're limited to these things and these things alone.
Right.
So that's where I kind of came at it with, like, the wording I used, it's not like acts of serious malfeasance or misconduct are magic words. There's no like, oh, that's what, it's just sort of, it sets the tone more that this isn't about, and making it clear that it's not about disagreement with someone's vote or someone's policy position or something like that. It's intended to be for something more serious than that, and not, if you're unhappy with that, wait till the next election. Like, basically, that's kind of the gist of what my thought process was here.
Dan, you were trying to hop in?
Oh, I think I lean towards Mary Beth's position of having a clear list as the way to ensure that it isn't just getting rid of someone because you can get 51% of the voters on board. If that's the goal, then I see how that also could be a goal. But with listing serious malfeasance, if I were to want to recall somebody and there was no like actual crime in the background, and they happen to have been like, I thought they were disrespectful to me at a meeting, and I wrote that down, and I got 350 signatures, who tells me it doesn't count? Like, what's the
Yeah.
fail-safe
Well,
there? Is the town clerk deciding?
That's one of the problems with inserting the language too, because the town clerk's job, just like when people are pulling nomination papers and something, has to be purely ministerial. if we add language, that means now the town clerk has to make a decision as to whether or not the rationale given for the recall position is sufficient under the act. And that's putting her in a, him or her in a, like, it's making them a judge, or a finder of fact, or an arbitrator. And that, I don't know, I don't think that that's appropriate myself, but, another thought I had, is, as you were just speaking, John, is that the way it was written initially in Mike Trainor's language says that 350 or more registered voters may file an affidavit with the town clerk containing the name of the office to be recalled and a statement of the grounds. That is leaving to the voters, at least these 350, to spell out what they think is going to be sufficient to get 4,000 people to sign off, and then 50% of whoever shows up to vote in their agreement. So instead of us today in 2024 trying to decide what are the things that are acceptable for a recall, and in fact, we're empowering the voters to make that decision.
Yeah, and the 350 just starts a time clock. That really doesn't do anything. It just starts saying, okay, from this point, you got 4 weeks to get all these signatures. That's all that does, is start that time clock. And you want that in there because it just makes it more difficult. Like, I know you worked on the CPA, Dan, that I think you had to get 10%, it was 10% of voters, and it took almost 4 months to do that. So that's why that 350 is in there, to start that time clock.
But even with the signatures, you could be recalled for anything. Like, there is no, if it's not specifically listed, I could write down something else. We're just assuming that there's a good faith actor who's actually writing down and not trying to recall somebody for a different reason. Like, is what is on the form actually the reason all those people are mad? And I'm not sure that would always be the case.
Right.
I'm going to throw this out here, and it may not work in my advantage because I think it goes against some of the things that we've talked about, but you brought this up earlier and it kind of just stuck. So, for example, the town manager, you said there's no real reason, they don't really have, the select board does not have to give a real reason.
To
Why?
get started.
Yeah,
anyway.
and you got, so like with that, you have 3 votes. I mean, you could have a town manager, and I'll use Wayne as an example because he was here for a long time. If 3 people just said, hey, we have no reason, but you know what, I don't like you, and then he was voted out, that might upset a lot of people in the town. So just think of it like that. I mean, it's using it for something that's not egregious, I guess, but it's kind of going against what the citizens, you know what I'm saying? Like, they may not be doing something right, and I have voted for people I don't really know. Like you said, you watch it on TV, but you don't until they get into that office.
But that's a political decision, so it is just a recall over disagreeing with the
I-
political vote.
But if we
Bring
have,
that up.
if there's 4,500 or 4,700 people that sign on that also disagree with whatever's
Yeah, that would be
happening.
highly unlikely to get that many people
Yeah.
that are
Yeah, like,
upset because of
right, if
the way
somebody's,
someone voted
right.
on
I'm
a
not
particular
signing that.
topic. Right, I wouldn't
Right.
sign it, right, exactly. And my fear is, as you mentioned, if we do a laundry list, we're gonna miss something, and then we're locked into that.
And other towns have this, so
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think we need to reinvent this. This is something that towns
I
have,
don't
and they're
think we
not
need to
using
reinvent
it, they're not using it willy-nilly constantly. We're not special where we're like, people in Danvers are especially gonna pull out recalls right and left. I think we're much like every other town where this is a fail-safe in case something dramatic happens.
But it's tough when you, again, this might be flipping from what I've been saying so far, but I've been turning over in my head, okay, what if we're dealing with a situation where we've seen how false information or misinformation can spread like wildfire, right? And let's say the library started voting to ban, I know it's not in your penumbra, but in your wheelhouse of what you guys do. But let's just say people got really aggravated because the library was either banning a bunch of books or refusing to ban books. So there's a political undercurrent to the question. And people are so mad about that, they're just gonna do a recall provision that's really about a decision about banning books or not.
But they could turn that banning books, or not banning books, because now you're harming children because you're allowing them to read these books that are not appropriate for their age. So you could turn something like that into something that could be egregious. Just, if you're thinking the world we're living in nowadays, just trying to be devil's advocate on that.
But are 4,700 people gonna do that, and then half of them show up and vote it when it's time?
On something like that, I would say so nowadays.
But they're not.
You don't
Like,
think so?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that other towns aren't.
No, but if the opportunity was there,
But there are,
It is.
it is there.
yes.
It is.
I think depending on what your community is like at the moment, it
Right,
could
but
happen.
I don't know that we're that different from a lot of communities.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I
think
don't,
everybody's got their problems right
yes,
now. in
yeah,
every
yeah, yeah,
community.
yeah, yeah.
I think there's
And we
stuff
might not
brewing in
be-
every, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing that resonated with me from Michael, how many towns are actually doing this? And I think it is a sign of the times, the towns need to have something in place. So I think that there's a lot of merit to this. But Mike has also said to us, they're not listing it. And that is the sign of the times too, that if you start listing, you put yourself in a very precarious situation if something should come up because of what we've already talked about.
So it's kind of an interesting context to me to think about this. Somebody could run for office and have positions that we find appalling. And we vote not for that person, but for whoever's running against them. But the other guy wins, the person that we thought was appalling. I mean, that's part of the process of elections and voting, right? And this is just opening the door to have another vote midterm, or a different type of vote midterm. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you have to throw to the electors, to the voters, and then we have to accept what they vote. We might not like it. We might be like, want to go home and close the door and hibernate for 4 years, like some of us feel. But it's the process. It's the process.
Right, so that's what this would just be another process. Yeah.
And I try to look at, I used to do like public sector labor law stuff, civil service, terminations, so forth, so on and so forth, and arbitrations when an employee was terminated. I always hated that word because you don't terminate them, you just take their job away. I mean, that word termination used to give me the creeps, but and the different bits of language about what qualifies to take away somebody's job, and it's generally very, very vaguely written, specifically, so that it can fit the circumstances. And if an employer can justify their reasons, you don't need to have a list of specifics because they have to justify it, and their justification is then subject to further review, in this case by the voters, in a civil service case is by the Civil Service Commission, in a collective bargaining agreements, you have to convince an arbitrator that you did it right. So, anyway, I'm not as worried about having be non-specific myself, but I can understand why, especially Mary Beth, and you point out so clearly why you'd want it to be. So where does that leave us? That's the question.
Sally,
Can-
Yes, go ahead, Mike, please.
As first of all, I again want to thank Mike for all his hard work. He clearly has done a lot of legwork on this. And as I said at the last meeting, excuse me, I found myself for a very long time on the fence about this, the need for this issue, and I somewhat agreed with, or strongly agreed, I guess, with, I think it was Mary Beth and Dan that both said that we need to have more succinct list of excuse me, of violations, if you will, to consider this. And then I heard Sally talk about putting it in the hands of the citizens, which I've always been a proponent of, which is why I was on the fence about having a recall process to begin with, that leave it to the citizens and or the voters, and if something happens midterm, then, hopefully they don't get reelected. But so I've been sitting here thinking as everyone's spoken and kind of came up with maybe a different approach that might satisfy both sides of this debate. And what if we were to consider a statement such as that the individual committed an act that the majority of the citizens of the town feel is sufficiently egregious to engage in the recall process?
There is
I don't think we
some,
can get much vaguer than that without, and putting it in the hands of the voters.
so there is something similar to that in there. It says, however, the vote of an elected official on a matter other than in connection with the conflict of interest violation shall not constitute valid grounds for recall.
Where, can you point to where?
That's
it
in
is?
section 2, I'm sorry. And then it
It's
says,
been stricken.
and be provided further that the voters themselves shall individually determine. So basically, it says, I think that's more of a suggestion. It just says that it has to be for a reason, but the reason is actually up to the voters, is what this says.
And it specifically says that the vote of an elected official on a matter is not valid grounds for recall. So that maybe, Mary Beth, addresses a little bit of what your concern was.
I think one of the things I was trying to build into my statement is that the initiation of this process is in the hands of the citizens. Not only is the vote in the hands, if it ever got that far that quickly, but the citizens themselves are deciding that the act or the violation or whatever that was committed is sufficiently egregious, or whatever word you want to use, to engage in the recall process. So anyway.
It's interesting, my concern comes back to, what does the town clerk do? What's the town clerk's responsibility when the initial petition is filed there with the 350 votes?
So that was answered at one of the meetings. So when it was, so for example, it's a suggestion that something like this, like it has to be an egregious act, it can't be what you voted, but I think I was told that a town clerk under this would never be put in that position to make a decision. It's gonna be up to the citizens.
So that's where
If
that's
that's-
not clear, though, because they're gonna decide, this is so egregious. I did not like that select chair did nothing to our concerns, so we should all come together and say, he's not leading our town appropriately. Do you think you can get 350 people? Yes, I do. And do you think that half those people would vote for it in this town currently? Yes, I do. So, but what is egregious, was that really that egregious? Maybe to that group of people, but is it egregious, like in the real, wording of it? That's
It's
what I'm saying.
4,000, over
Yeah,
4,500,
but
it's not 350. It's,
It's 350 that just filed,
Yeah.
and then
No.
they have 20 days, whatever it is, to
Yeah.
get 4,000.
And I understand that's a lot, but I'm seeing what just happened in Beverly, and they were able to get those signatures in a short amount of time. I do think, I'm just trying to state that I don't like how vague it is for it. And then if I wanted to recall on Natalie at the library, because guess what? They're not listening to my concerns, and they're having drag queen story times and whatever, I don't care. And I go to the clerk and I have my signatures and I say to the clerk, this is why I want it recalled. Now, is the clerk gonna look at that and say, oh, yeah, that's egregious, or no, that's not? Like, how is that?
She's not-
You're put,
Yeah, she's not gonna make any call.
so she's just saying, okay, yep, okay, we start the process, and then it
Yes.
goes to a vote in the
Yes.
community.
It doesn't go to
No,
a
it
vote
doesn't.
with that. From there, they have to go out and get
4,700.
in 4 weeks.
700 people to sign a petition within how long?
4 weeks,
In 4 weeks. So it's not just an
or
initial.
20 business days, but
It's
yeah.
not just the initial filing, it's then the follow-up.
Yeah.
And how far did Beverly get along? So you can start, anyone can get 350 signatures. I mean, neighboring community, like Arlington is 50 signatures.
Yeah.
That's a really meaningless.
No, I think they got like 4,000 signatures in less
Well,
than 24
They
hours.
But
got 4
coming-
times the required amount.
Right.
Right, but coming from Beverly like I do and knowing other things, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for those people. for a long list of other things
Sure.
that wasn't just about that.
I was-
So putting it in perspective, he's probably lucky that they didn't do that sooner. That's all I'm saying.
mean-
That's sort of
But
the
and they
point.
didn't really have something maybe that they thought that they could, but this was like the straw that broke the camel's back, that now it was like,
Yeah.
so in other words, I feel like it was it proved right there that you can't do it for no reason, because otherwise it would have been done already for that.
Going back to section 1 of this, proposed changes, it is moved to with a term of office longer than 1 year. So then that brings in town meeting members, because there are town meeting members that serve 3 and 2-year terms, so.
But
No, it's
No,
not, it's
they're-
townwide.
It's it's only town-wide positions, and they're named within it.
No, they struck it.
well, this is,
Well, I
It says
wouldn't-
townwide.
these are John Almeida's suggested changes.
Yeah.
No, we haven't accepted that
Okay.
or not yet. We're
I
looking at
just-
the, yeah.
I thought we were looking at his changes.
Well, we are, but we don't have to
Okay.
accept them, and we can look
Okay.
at them and say, yeah, we agree, or no, we don't.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah,
the-
I
the
would
logic-
just-
The logic for taking them out is if we have new positions that are created over time, I didn't think we should limit it to the parenthetical. And I thought that the term of office longer than 1 year goes with my suggestion that we don't, changing 6 months to a year, so that we're not, like, it basically takes a town moderator out of the equation. Or any other 1-year positions that are created over time.
And it still says townwide elected office.
Right, it's
That hasn't
townwide
been
elected
struck.
officials.
So
Yeah,
that wouldn't be a town, I don't see the point of having an election for a town meeting member, or a recall for a town meeting member, to be honest. That's just my opinion on it, but.
And if somebody wants to recall me, I mean,
So with,
Have at it.
So, so hypothetically, if you had a recall for a particular person that might have served as a select board member, and then that person became a town meeting member after the fact, that's just okay? Like,
yeah.
yeah? Then I
Well,
don't,
no, because there's a
Well,
provision
there
towards
is
the end that after a recall, you can't run for another office
Oh, is
for
it?
like
Okay.
a certain amount of
12
time.
12
months.
months.
So that's just a year.
But then again, I guess then it would again be up to the voters. If the voters wanted them in,
Yeah.
they'd get back in, and if,
Well, no, the provision isn't what being elected, it's being appointed.
oh,
It's
there you
section
go.
8. So I guess the logic is, if someone gets removed from the select board couldn't bring him back in.
as an appointment
Yeah.
somewhere.
No, yeah, but
Yeah,
presumably
right.
to like, back to the select board, right?
with the way we've kind of talked about the specifics and the general, it seems like we kind of have two different perspectives of purpose, of is it for specific acts, or is it just the will of the voters, and hey, if the voters want to recall somebody, they can recall them for anything, both of which are legitimate philosophical views. I'm just not sure which one we're trying to meet. Is it a recall petition as long as 51% want it, or is it a recall position only if you did something wrong? Because if it's only if you did something wrong, you really, I think, need a list. Otherwise, you're automatically in the
And
51% category.
I mean, the list, to be specific to a point, but it could encompass, like, it's this, and this, in addition, you know, within the realm of whatever the categories are, you know?
But I don't know that it's up to us to decide what those are. Like, who,
Okay,
why
so,
do we get to so if you leave it general, it's not up to us to say, these are the things that the public can recall somebody on. Because it's not up to me to determine what someone else thinks is egregious.
Right, I think it's the difference between making it subjective or objective. Like in this case, they're a human being who committed a crime, and therefore they should be removed from office, and there's no subjectivity to it, versus the community finds something distasteful, or to use the word
Right.
we're using, egregious. I also find, just while I have the microphone, the wording in what I think you read, which is they have to be convicted.
Yeah.
That to me brings back the time component of the recall in terms of what we were talking, I think you mentioned it first, which is it for when something that occurred while they were in that position or anything 20 years ago that was suddenly discovered? Because I think those are also two very different situations, and I feel like it's important to be clear about, are we looking to have someone be able to be recalled because of something they did in that position that was considered egregious, or that they did something egregious as a human being?
I think it's the second.
I think it's the first.
Interesting. Because, well, if I commit a murder, that has nothing to do with me serving.
Correct.
So, but I think you should be able to probably recall me for that.
I don't.
Oh, really?
No, because I think if you're serving if you're in your position and you're doing it well, then, and you haven't been convicted of that crime, if you're gonna be, brought up
Yeah.
on charges, then you're gonna be in jail, then you can no longer serve, and there's a system in place for that.
But that could take 10 years. It wouldn't
Exactly,
be-
which is
right,
why I think the language in that is actually very weak, because if you have to be convicted, if they
Right.
performed that crime or committed that crime while they were in office, their term's gonna be up before it even goes to court.
You get, no,
So
I
how
mean.
does this
I
have
agree.
any teeth, actually?
No, I agree with you there. I just didn't agree with that it's just what they're doing in office. Because I think the office thing is more subjective, where more people, I think, could agree with, more people would agree with what they've done in office. And I think there's a larger community that could disagree with what they do, like commit a crime that has nothing to do with their office.
I think one of the things that we talked about at last meeting when you weren't here was we don't run background checks on people to run for these offices, and even in politics in general, to run for a seat, no one does a background check. So, and there's probably something in everyone's past, so does that mean that they don't, we'd have nobody serving, I think. Because someone's done something distasteful in their whole life. I'm sure everybody has, right? Everybody's got some little skeleton. So that's not really up to us, because if they're not running background checks in order to hold these positions, then that's not really up to us to worry about what somebody did. Like, it's gotta be while they're, I think it's gotta be while they're serving. And that's the purpose of this, not something that they might have done as a teenager or whatever. I don't know.
And I'll add, the way this is written is one of the most difficult in the state to execute. And like I said, you don't see these a lot, and a lot of these are like 10%, 12% of voters, 17, like, ours is hard.
Yeah,
And
the bar's
yeah.
up there, yeah.
You would really have to do something to upset. And the other thing is, people don't like spending money, don't like elections are expensive. And that's another thing that's gonna come up, because people are gonna say, hey, do you really wanna have an election? Do you really wanna spend this money? And it's a high threshold, the way this is designed. I mean, no matter what you do, it's never gonna be perfect, but it's looking at what's best for the community. Do I think having no process is best for the community? I personally don't. I think, town meeting probably felt that way. It's just, you can write this a number of different ways. It's never gonna be perfect. But it's just looking at what you think the best way to approach this is. And I think what we have now definitely isn't. And I looked at a lot of other communities. You did, find one that names certain things. The vast majority don't. And I think there's a reason for that. And the thing is, too, like, say the town clerk, those are guidelines, and the town clerk says, yeah, I think it's that. What if people disagree with that? Could we get sued? Could someone challenge that in court? I don't, and like I said, this is vague. I think most places leave this vague for a reason.
Well, what's the phrase, don't let the perfect get in the way of the
Good.
good? Thank you, I couldn't remember the last
Yeah,
word.
no,
So I don't know how to address it. I mean, maybe we've talked it to death, and as far as we can, for now, maybe, I'm not suggesting we have to move on, but maybe what we need is to let it kind of bubble around and come back to it at our next meeting, and you do not have to come again if this is what we end up doing. I mean, you can certainly, but I
Yeah,
don't feel like you have to. I appreciate that you've come 2 nights, and that's after the tail end of all of the hours of work you've put in to bring this before the community is something to consider.
Sally, may I have just a question, Claire? What was the journey of this particular act? Obviously, you presented it in town meeting. It was then approved, and I'm looking at the actual article, which
Yeah.
said to authorize select board to take actions necessary to accomplish the purposes of this article. So it went to the select board, is that what it went?
Yeah, so it was presented, I think 3 times at town meeting, 2 by myself.
Okay.
Okay, so the first meeting so when an article.
I don't mean
yeah.
to, I'd like to just.
Yeah, no. So when an
No.
article is not recommended by the finance committee, you have to do an amendment to that, which 2 years ago, I did that. We did a voice vote. It was determined it had failed. I'm not necessarily sure it did, but that was the decision.
At
Then-
town meeting.
Yes, at town meeting. And then we voted on the actual article, and it was determined that by the moderator at that point that the vote was too close, so we did a stand-in vote. When we did a stand-in vote, it was 38 agreed with the finance committee, and 110 people disagreed with the finance committee. So I don't think it was all that close. So because there was no motion, it didn't really pass. Even though the vast majority of people disagreed with the finance committee, it never passed because there was no motion. So that gave me the ability to go back again the following year. Again, I went through the whole process. So when you do that, it's the select board, and then you go to the finance committee, they make recommendations off of it. The finance committee recommendation the second year was to send it to this group. And I could have amended it again, we could have voted on it there, but I think feedback's good, because like I said, I looked at other towns, I pieced this together, I made some changes from, like I made the numbers harder, I changed a couple things, I added some offices, but it's good to have more than myself look at this, I'll be honest. So that's why when they made that recommendation, send this, I didn't amend it at that point. I stood up and said, hey, why don't we vote for this and send it to this committee? Because I thought that would be what's best.
And I only asked that question more reason to respond to what you had said, where we go. I mean, it seems as though this is a hot potato, and people are moving it along, and I don't know what people hope to have happen, but I think they're looking for someone to make a yay or nay decision on this, and seems like what I would consider appropriate places to make the decision. They've decided to move it someplace else to a bunch of citizens like us, say, well, you guys do it then, all right? And then you make the decision because it's too hot an issue for us to decide.
Well, we can't make a decision, we can only make a recommendation, and
Wow.
I don't think that we can I don't think we should shy away from that. I think my question would be, is it appropriate at this point to gauge our feelings as a committee before we decide if we're going to, perhaps table it either for another group to take another look at it or for us to look at it at another time? But, I mean, just trying to get the temperature of the table, so to speak, it seems that we're in general favor of this being included in some form, but I'm just wondering if it would be valuable to sort of put that into a more structured
We could
place.
take just a informal kind of hand raising vote with the general principle first, which is what we've been talking about, which is so I think we all can say, okay, we should have a recall provision in our charter document somewhere. So to me, the question at hand is, should it be a generalized statement without giving grounds, or should it be specific? Should we take a hands vote on that issue?
Could I ask
Yeah.
maybe more specifically than
Yeah.
that? Like, we've covered a number of things here. Should it be limited to actions while in office or not? Should it be limited to articulated listed items or not. You know, like, kind of the things that we've talked about.
Okay.
Maybe approach it that way.
Sure. And then a possibility is, Mary Beth, if you sent, well, let's take those votes first, just not formal votes.
Just what people's views are.
Yeah. So, first question, does everybody think that that's a helpful exercise?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't see everybody nodding heads. So, okay, first, should it be limited to actions when a person is in office or not? So how do we vote that?
So
Who
I
says
would
in
vote
office?
I say in office.
So
I
how
would
many,
say in.
keep your hand up so I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feel that it should be in office. What do you think, Mike?
I would say in office as well.
So that's 6 of our group of 10. Okay. And we don't have Noah's vote, but 6 is more than half of our group. Say in office only. Okay, so this next question, should a provision include a list of behaviors, actions that would qualify, or should it be generalized? Is that
Well-
well enough?
I guess what I would suggest is, should there be any criteria or no criteria, right?
Okay.
Because the way it's written is no criteria, other than you can't be bounced for a vote.
Right.
So maybe that's the first fork. Should it be any criteria or no criteria? And then if we think there should be criteria, should they be specific criteria or general?
Well,
More
how would,
general.
how would general criteria be different than no criteria?
Like the word malfeasance, that's.
As opposed to a list
Oh.
of,
No, I understand. I
Yeah.
just wasn't sure how that would be different from no criteria.
well, the way it's written now is there's no, it
Right.
could be for any reason or,
Right, but
Yeah.
if you're saying,
Except the vote, a vote of an elected
Except,
official.
yeah.
right. But like, if we say, no, we want it to be more specific, but then you say.
Then it would be
listed-
malfeasance or a whole list.
I know, but malfeasance, I mean,
I just looked that up, it just means wrongdoing.
right, I'm like, that's,
just a-
again,
it's just a general- yeah.
So it's the same thing.
That's what I was on my phone. I was
If
like-
you say,
Well, I think then it just gives people a little idea that it has to be something. It can't just be because you don't like the person's hair color or new haircut or whatever. Like, it just gives them a general bar.
I guess.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't have it like a real
No,
anything. I mean,
right.
Again, but this goes back to the clerk. So what does that mean?
yeah. I mean, I think it doesn't, like, I don't think the clerk would interpret and say, like,
Right, so
you know,
what's the-
this is malfeasance or this isn't.
I guess we know where I stand.
I
Anyway.
think it boils down to, we have to trust the majority of the voters to
Correct.
give it consideration. I mean, that's
Yes.
democracy, right?
Yep.
So we agree that the town clerk should not be placed in that position, and that language is clearly where it should be, and that's good. And if it meets the standards of the numbers required in whatever document is approved, then the number of voters that's required to actually make it happen, I think maybe that has to be the standard, because I don't see how any kind of laundry list, any kind of wording, I mean, that means nothing.
Right.
It means
doesn't-
nothing. Malfeasance just means nothing, and it's open to interpretation, and anyone can choose to interpret that, and they will. But I think, in my mind, it has to boil down to having a high enough standard, a high enough number of people that have to feel strongly enough to take the action and make the vote, and we have to give that to them. We have to acknowledge that that's how this works.
I guess another approach that, kind of the way I wrote this was like sort of, this isn't about an elected official performing their duties in office. Like, just again, do we want it to be a way to kind of give someone a second chance at an election for disagreement with how someone's carrying out their duties? Or do we want it to be, that's perfectly, you know, like, or, like, how do we, I think kind of going to your question earlier, do we want this to be available for any and every reason, if they can get the signatures, Or do we want to say, no, this shouldn't be about knocking people out of office for just doing what they think is right, or what they think is the right thing to do? So, like, if we want it to be, it's just a political process, if you can get the signatures, and if that's the kind of view of the committee, then that's a very different perspective I think a different perspective than I have, which is, I don't think it ought to be available for the way someone votes, or the way someone conducts a meeting necessarily, or the way someone, is doing their job as an elected official. So I guess maybe that's another question we could ask the group is, do we want it to be available for any reason, or should we cabin off, it's not available, for someone who's just disagreeing with the way someone's doing their job?
Are we in agreement that the town should actually have this act?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
we've
think we are.
established
Have we
that.
all established that fact?
Yeah, well,
I
I
think that was
know,
presumed, but I think
We should
maybe
go.
we should take a
yes.
general.
Yes.
Actually, I know Matt Vichuk has said he's not convinced that we need a recall provision.
I think he's changed his mind though. Mike, have you changed your mind?
I think I've arrived at the point where I'm willing to go along with it if we can come up with satisfactory language that either is very specific or is very vague that leaves the door open. Maybe this list, if we're going to provide it or consider it, should not be things such as specific items, but things like breaking a code of ethics or committing a felony or things of that nature, or simply just violating your oath of office. It's gotten to the point where I can go along with having this recall provision if we can come to a reasonable agreement on how we define it.
I have a question. So our committee was not directed to develop this recall provision. We were to review the one that was written. So really, I would think we're either saying, yes, there should be a recall included in the act, the one as presented, not rewriting it. That is not our responsibility.
No, but I think that especially the finance committee was like, they need to look at it. So I don't think it was about like, it's as worded, this is what they should do. I mean, I don't.
Well, I don't know that because
If you
it was
listen
to
to the.
move the warrant. This was the warrant
Right.
was what Mike had presented.
But if you listen to the actual discussion among the finance committee, it's not that clear. I understand, like,
But the warrant,
Right.
the way it was written, was
But-
clear,
okay.
right?
So it can be
I guess,
modified.
I haven't read the, right.
So that may have been the intention, but I think it's what you're saying. I think it was just a discussion to have. I'm
Right.
up to changing certain things in this if the group finds.
Thank you.
I don't think it should just be me doing this, okay? And that's why I jumped on the opportunity when
Yes.
it was suggested.
Right.
I didn't modify the like I just said, I stood up and I said, I'm up for a committee reviewing this.
Right. But
so-
not a committee to rewrite this. I'm not being disrespectful, I'm just trying to keep us on track of what our job here
Well-
is for.
So we talked kind of earlier in the meeting about how this could fit into the Town Manager Act. And we're going through that act, kind of article by article, line by line, and suggesting edits to it. So to me, it would make sense that we propose, let's put in a warrant article about recall, and this is the language that we're suggesting. So I feel that we do have the ability to suggest changes, as John did in his, the handout that I've given. I've got to say, John, I don't agree with all of the changes. But I suppose we could also say, well, we just took it exactly as Mr. Trainer presented it. I don't know, but I feel that we do have the ability to suggest Like, we could say, let's bump that 350 up to 500. Let's bump the percentage of voters to a higher amount. You know, we could tweak things like that. I feel that we could also say, instead of language that says, that the initial petition has to contain the names of the persons whose recall is sought, and the grounds have to be stated in the affidavit. However, the vote of an elected official on a matter other than in connection with, self-interest shall not constitute valid grounds. Do we want to put more in there than that? Because the next phrase is, provided the voters themselves individually determine whether any of the grounds are sufficient. So, it just comes back to that question about, do we have specifics listed or do we not?
Well, I just wonder though that if all the other towns, like Mike was saying, that most of this language originally had come from other towns, and if all these other towns adopted this and had not had it be a free-for-all, I'm wondering why we are having no faith in our town that all of a sudden it's gonna become a free-for-all. I understand, climates are the way climates are, but I think every city in town right now is having climate issues, and still there is no petitions being thrown around left and right, willy-nilly.
And that's the thing, you say our town's different, but I mean, there's probably a group.
I don't think our town's any different than any other place
True.
right now.
So there may be a group of people that would get the 350 signatures, maybe try to start to, but it's just such a feat beyond that. And if this group, and it's like you said, I'm willing to edit, like if you said we need 25% of registered voters, that's fine. As it is, ours is pretty much more difficult than most places, but I don't want to make it impossible, but
Right.
it's pretty difficult as it is, as it's written.
Right.
And like I said, the reason I went with this, and I know that was feedback from at least one member of the select board to name certain things, and they felt very strongly about that. But when I looked, the vast majority of these don't. And I just,
For a reason,
it's
because
for a
if
reason.
something is missed, then you're locked into it. I don't think naming things is the way to go.
Agreed.
Well, I
We're
would-
not attorneys,
Right.
we're not, I mean, I'd like to think that most of us wouldn't even think of doing half the things that need to be named, and how are we gonna think of every rotten thing out there that could possibly, somebody could do to, I'd rather just, we have to leave it up to the people, because I'm not gonna sign anything just because somebody tries to get 350 signatures on something that is not what the intention of this is, so.
I think, just to speak to your comment, Mary Beth, I would hate for us to miss this opportunity that I think we have. I think that this has been put forward so many times. I think if we generally agree that it has a place in our town, this is our opportunity not to toss it back and have it go somewhere else where it's just a billiard ball. I was gonna say something else. Oh, and then to your point, I guess what's important to me is not just looking back at what has happened in the other towns thus far, but to really look ahead and look at the power of AI, to look at the power of gathering those signatures in microseconds, and just making sure that, again, this is an opportunity for us to look ahead and make sure that whatever we are suggesting has power into the future, to make sure that this process is always a really thoughtful one, and that only occurs when really is needed. So this sounds like a really high standard. I guess I don't have the foresight to really know if it does, but I'm concerned that maybe it should be elevated, just because of the rapidity at which you can reach people now that you just didn't have
Well,
10 years ago, 20 years ago.
These are still all, the signatures have to be collected by hand, so it's not that you can just, the internet, these
True,
are
I just
still-
mean, in terms of having the word spread in this very short period of time, I think, getting the word spread and having people mobilize is much easier than it once was. So I just want to make sure that it still
Right,
is a
but do you
thoughtful
think
process.
Do you think that 4,000 some odd people are gonna mobilize over nothing?
See,
Like,
that's
I
the thing
just-
is, I don't.
Yeah,
But I
I don't.
don't know that I have the ability to anticipate if that someday might be too small a bar that it would allow people, and that's not our job, you know, to look into the future, I guess, but I guess just having the discussion of looking into the future and how those signatures can be gathered, and maybe that's not true, the signatures gathering is not the issue, but getting the people to come together maybe too quickly while it's sort of in a witch hunt phase before people have had the time to really think it through. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, again, you've got to remember that collection of the 350 signatures and then the 20% of registered voters group, then there's an election. That just allows for the election to take place. And
We all know how Danvers turns out for elections usually.
Yeah,
I wonder if one idea I was thinking, and I don't know if this is feasible or not, to say that this particular, let's say we decided to insert it in the Town Manager Act, to say something like, in 5 years, or in 2 years, this section of the act shall be reconsidered, or something like that.
So, I do want to say, so it was, I think, everyone's intent to put it in these acts. Like New Bedford's going through this process right now, they're very insistent on it being separate.
Right.
So it's an opinion. I do think that was the way that these documents being reviewed, let's put it in there. When you speak with their mayor's office, say, no, we're doing this as a home rule petition, we're gonna keep it separate. I mean, it's an opinion. I'm just saying that I think it was suggested this is the way we should do it, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that we have to.
Except for that you would have to probably bring it forward again as
Correct.
another
So we-
citizen's position.
It is easier
petition.
for me to put it, yes.
Because,
I'm
I
just,
mean, yeah.
it works for me to put it in the act, yes.
Yeah.
I think it makes more sense for it to be.
Yeah, and if, we also talked about in the beginning that these acts should be looked at more often. So if we did it, if it was every decade instead of 20 years, then every 10 years, this would be looked at again, if it was in this Town Manager Act.
Go ahead.
I guess I'd ask the group, we have differing views on whether, it should be kind of like no stated reason or articulated list of reasons, but is there a consensus, or what are people's perspectives on, it's not available for what I worded as the discretionary performance of a lawful act or prescribed duty of office. So someone doing their job, this isn't available for that. Do folks agree generally that that would be an
Yes.
inappropriate use of the?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, because I think, like, to me, that's an important criteria, that we, it's even if we don't have any reason why it's listed criteria to use it, it's not available for
It's not for that.
that.
And I think that should be sufficient to at least say that, so that a bar is set for what the purpose of this is for, without being too specific so we don't miss something.
How do you feel about that, Michael?
The only thing, I agree it should be used, and like I said, that suggestion's in there. The problem is who's gonna make that decision, like to put it on the town clerk,
Well,
is that what
that-
you're saying?
but
Like, it's
that's-
a suggestion, you can put it in there, but it's
Yeah.
a suggestion.
No, what
But that's pretty clear,
Yeah,
though.
that-
I mean, I don't think the town
If-
clerk
if a-
should have a problem with saying that. Like, if it was, if the person says, well, I don't like the way this person voted, well, it's pretty clear in here that's not what it's for. And she could say that, and that
Yeah.
puts the end to it right there.
Like, that to me doesn't require a lot of judgment.
Right.
If the petitioner is, like,
Right.
not savvy enough to, to
Yeah.
write it in such a way that it's, it's written like that. Like, yeah,
Right.
this is because of the vote on December 15th.
Right, exactly.
That's
Well, then, no, it
pretty
doesn't meet the-
clear.
Right.
But I thought you said that the town clerk wouldn't be deciding that, it would be the people that were gonna be deciding that. She was just initiating the
Well, just the way
petition and recall.
she would judge signatures, she would judge, like, this is a pretty clear cut and
It
dry
would be
thing.
she would be referring back to this document that says it's not for that purpose. So
Yes,
she's
but
not
I-
making the determination, we've made it, she's just telling the person, you're wrong, you can't do that.
Yeah, but I thought what you guys told me earlier is that she wouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, we're
I mean,
back
I
to a
agree.
previous square that we were on before.
No,
it
that's-
sounds
No,
like.
I think it was determining what would be egregious.
Yes, but, all right, so if we take out egregious, determining what the recall
Forgot to bring my bag.
issue is, she's still then determining that?
No, she's not determining, she's,
She's approving it? That's where I want to be clear.
right,
You submit a petition for a recall. It states on that list why.
right. But if
She's
it's,
still looking at that and saying yes or no?
well, she's determining if it meets the criteria that we've set forth in this document. And if it's, so like, say if it is because of a vote, well, she can refer to it and say, no, it says right here, no. So she's not making that determination, we've made it, she's just bringing it to their attention.
That sounds like she's a judge, and she's judging
It's
the
not-
fact
No,
based
it's not a
against
It has
the
anything
law.
to do with
Right.
the job of that individual in the town, then it's not
But-
eligible.
But
for
that's a
recall.
determination.
Yeah,
Right.
but the
That's
clerk
like-
makes determinations,
All the time, she determines.
like,
what's
are
a
these
correct
voters
vote.
actually residents of the, I mean, are these
Is
signatures,
this a real signature?
signatures of
Right.
voters?
So
There are
that's a-
criteria that that clerk has to
That's more
determine.
ministerial.
Right, and what I'm
That's
saying is that,
clerical.
that this kind of thing is close to clerical. I mean, it's not,
Right.
like, if on its face, this is about a vote, then that, to me, seems like a pretty cut or dried, like, similar to, is this person's address in Danvers or isn't it? Like, it's not that, there's not that much judgment that goes into it.
I don't think it is cut and dry. I mean, what if, so like, what Mary Beth had read, you convicted, what if you're charged with a crime but not yet convicted? You know what I'm saying? It's gonna leave.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about right now.
No, well, it's the town clerk making a decision.
Yeah, but-
I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, I personally don't think that should be in. I think it should definitely just be, I liked Mike's original doc, I've listened to it for the past couple of years. And I've agreed with it, I've stood up to agree with it. I think it should be up to the voters. I am not comfortable making the decision for the town of Danvers, what they decide is or is not inappropriate for their elected officials. I don't feel,
So
it's
even as simple as a vote, like that, it's telling people that this is not, this document is not because you don't like how someone voted?
I mean, I agree that I don't want it to happen, but again, then it is on the clerk. Because what if it's not just about a vote? Because you could put that. You could put like,
Yes, and that's what I was just gonna say.
You could
This
specifically
language
put-
is shaping what somebody could come forward with to the clerk's office, and the language that Mr. Trainer put in here says that what has to be on that initial petition with the 350 signatures, that there has to be grounds of the recall stated in an affidavit. However, it says, provided, however, that the vote of an elected official on a matter shall not constitute grounds for recall.
So it's already in
That's
there.
already in there, so that's what we're saying, right.
But so that's very
in-
specific.
But what I'm trying to say is that if that is specifically said, you can't do this because of a elected official's vote on something, then if the 350 signed document comes in and the clerk reads it and it says, this is because of a vote that was made on December 4th, the town clerk can say, this is not
Correct.
an appropriate affidavit, you're out of here. Do you see what I mean? So
Yes.
that one reason, and it's like, yes, your name is on the list, or no, your name is not. It's purely ministerial.
Agreed.
And I think that is helpful, useful, appropriate to have here. Now, people might present an affidavit saying, I think this person should, there should be a recall because this person was in a drunken brawl at the Berry Tavern last weekend. But really, they're mad about a vote, okay? Well, you can't quite correct for that, but at least that reason, just the language alone is gonna shape how the process can move. And if it can't be for a vote, then that kind of tamps down what some people might try to do.
Yeah, I think my issue was just because the line that John had put in, discretionary performance of a lawful act or prescribed duty of office is a little more broad than just saying for a vote.
Right.
Because then we're saying, what is the duty of office? Is it ethical? Is it, so that's, I think, where it can get a little bit more wishy-washy with what the clerk has to decide. Whereas if it just says, like it already does, not for a vote that they have made, then that's a
So,
done.
do we have the ability, so when I originally submitted this, that was the impression I was under, that you can't be recalled for the way you vote. When it got reviewed with town council and they came back, I think it was either the select board meeting or the finance committee meeting, Steve just said, well, the town clerk is not gonna make that decision. I think he referred to it as a stop-go. We're either doing it or not doing it. It's, they wouldn't be put in that position. So I don't know if we could have that's fine to have that language in there. It's just, that was something that came back to me and said, no, this is not,
Yeah, I think it was the
this,
finance committee.
yeah, this is not what we're gonna do.
While people are
So-
looking at this language, I had a question about this sentence anyway, so I might as well ask it now. So looking at section 2, you
Yep.
have 350 or more registered voters may file an affidavit with the town clerk containing the name of the office to be recalled. It's really the officer, right? It's the,
Yes.
okay?
Right.
And a statement of the grounds. The town clerk shall thereupon provide to the voters copies of printed form petition blanks addressed to the respective board demanding the recall. The blank shall be issued under the signature and official seal of the town clerk. They shall be dated and contain the names of all persons to whom they are issued. What does that mean, to whom they are issued? Does that mean the people who are they're,
My interpretation of it, so this language has already passed. So I didn't go and change language that much because this has already been through the legislator.
for another,
So
for
I
another
guess,
senior town, right?
my interpretation of that, it would be the person that submitted the recall, correct? Or,
I think I know this
I'm
one
not
from the
re- yeah.
CPA petition. When each of us went to the town clerk to get a blank, our name had to be at the top of the blank. And as I took out that blank form. I don't know why it had to be or what the reason was, but it did need somebody's name at the top who actually asked the town clerk to receive it.
That makes sense if you read it.
So maybe it would be helpful to have it say, they shall be dated and contain the names of all persons who requested. I don't know, just that, I didn't know what that meant.
I think Dan brings up a good point. So I think it's, you have to go to the clerk, get the official form, have your name on it, have it recorded. So that prevents me from printing something out at my house and just, I guess, right? Does that make sense?
On the other hand, anybody could turn it in. So I never
Yeah.
quite understood how that, I was never entirely clear there.
Okay. Maybe it should be, they shall be dated and shall contain the names of all persons to whom the blank forms are issued.
Yeah, I think that,
And then it's the name of the person whose recall is sought and the grounds of the recall as stated in the affidavit, provided that a vote of an elected official on a matter shall not constitute valid grounds for recall. There's one exception there, which is if the vote violates a conflict of interest provision. For instance, somebody votes to appoint their son to the fire department, and that's violates conflict of interest. That vote could be, according to this language, could be a grounds for a recall vote, a recall process. Okay. So it's been difficult as we're kind of clouding Mr. Trainor's initial petition with the very thoughtful provisions that John and Mike have added in comments, but it might help if we're all beginning with the initial language and talking about ideas that we have. It is now 10 minutes of 8. I've always tried to have our meetings be 2 hours long. We can go on if people would like, but I'm just, where do we go? What's people's pleasure here.
Is our next order of business to begin moving into the Town Manager Act? Is that, not necessarily tonight, but is that the next thing we're supposed to be doing? Yes?
I mean, I don't know if there's a supposed to be doing, but that's what I would suggest. And in the packets tonight that I've handed out, I've included that triple space Town Manager Act, in which I've made a number of proposed changes just to get the discussion going, like we did with the Town Meeting Act. It's not, so anyway, but,
So I really think that what we should probably do is make some more thoughts that we have on this, some more changes, and come, when we convene next time, we really should finish this up, I think, because we're already in the process of it, and I don't want us to kind of like leave and come back to it. So maybe we start with this next meeting and then just get this finished up, and we might just have to take a vote on it, and just see where we stand.
Right, it's obvious we're not all gonna be in agreement on this, and the wording of it, I think it's gonna be a lot of compromise with us. And so I think that's just kinda,
I mean, we
maybe
all
how it's
agree
gonna
we
be.
need it.
Well, I don't know that we do all agree that, right?
Well, I think the majority,
Yes,
I think we're getting the idea that the majority think we need it.
Maybe we should vote on that this evening?
yeah.
If the majority of us present agree that a recall provision should be included in the Town Manager Act.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
so who thinks it should be included? Mike, what is your vote? Should be included? I'll tell you,
Well, I think the Town Manager Act is the place that it goes if we adopt it.
right,
Yeah,
but the
that's what we
question,
thought.
but the question is, should
you
there be a
think-
recall provision in the town charter documents? Should there be a recall provision? Whichever act we put it in, that's not really the purpose of this particular vote, but
At this point, I would say I'm leaning more towards yes. I think perhaps what we need to address next is the simple question of, do we want to approach the stipulations as a list of succinct violations, or do we want to be just the opposite, as vague as possible? And I'm leaning towards being as vague as possible, because I think,
Okay,
as
so
others have
Can
said,
we just take
if we
that
start
one
making a
vote
list of things, then we're surely going to either A, forget something, or B, technology or something else is going to come up with
Right.
another violation that we didn't consider. And now the only caveat to that is if we were to create a list, we might consider the language that including but not limited to the following.
yeah, I've thought of that too during tonight's discussion. But first, the first question, the primary question is, should the town of Danvers have a recall provision in place? Wherever we put it, however it's worded, should we have one? Everybody who thinks we should, please put up your hand and give me a minute to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which way are you on, Mike? Yes or no?
I'll say yes.
So that's 6. Because I'm a no, you're a no, you're a no, and no is not here. Okay, so that shapes, I think, where we go from here.
So then, just let's take an informal vote on keeping it vague or putting something in.
Now, the people that don't want it at all, I'm not sure how, you can vote however you want, obviously, but,
Well, just, I mean, there can be a respectful disagreement and then move forward with what it should look like, even though
Okay, great.
for instance, for my way of thinking, even though I don't think we really need one,
yeah.
I am ready to talk about what it should say if we have one.
Okay, great.
And I specifically really appreciate all the work that you've done on this. So please don't, I hope you aren't offended by my vote, because it's not,
Oh, I'm not offended.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone has an opinion. So.
yeah, so thank you. Is it okay to have a hands up on specific or not specific? Or is that?
Why not, just so we know?
Maybe it's
just so
not
we have a-
specific enough. Maybe it's not.
I vote to keep it vague.
I do,
Anybody-
I do too,
Well,
Okay.
at this point.
I'm sort of like in the middle here, because I think, I don't think it's a good idea to have a laundry list, but on the other hand, I do want a couple of sidebars on it. So like, I'm kind of in between.
Yep, but that's, so that, right, but I could go along with that as long as they were not specific.
Mike, you could abstain from this vote, and then you could abstain from this
Yeah,
vote,
yeah.
and then present another vote if you'd like.
Well, yeah, this is all just informal anyway.
Yeah.
We're just
Yeah.
talking here, right? We're just talking.
Vague, not vague.
Vague.
Vague, not
What,
vague.
we putting hands up here?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
So what is?
vague.
Vague.
Vague, well, I'd go with vague.
Yeah, I think I'll go with vague versus laundry list, but that's not the end of the
Right.
story
Okay,
for
now
me.
hang on, now keep your hands up, because I have to
Yeah.
count you. And Mike, which way are you gonna vote on this? Do you understand the question, if we made it clear?
Yeah, I think vague is the direction I would lean.
Okay, so,
And-
let me just count, I hate to interrupt, but, so you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, say vague.
So at least we have an idea of what we're gonna be doing for next meeting.
Right. Unless people change their mind.
Okay.
Well, and at some point, we have to not change our minds.
Yes, yes,
Because we could go back and forth and back and forth.
this is true.
Well, and it was really hard, just at our very first couple of meetings, just to kind of grasp, well, what the heck is it? What's the shape of what we're gonna do? And we finally did. And it's okay for us to have, I mean, this is a big deal.
Well,
And
it's-
you felt personally the impact of
Right.
these issues. So this is a big deal and a personal big deal.
Right.
So it makes sense to me that we struggle a little bit over it. So it warrants,
We should take
it
it
deserves
lightly.
our time. So why don't we all think about it a little bit more over the next period of time? And our next meeting, I wanted to talk with you guys about this, is, so we're the first and third Wednesdays, so the next one will be the 18th. Do you guys want to meet the 18th? Or would you like to skip it because of Christmas?
Well, what's the one after the 18th?
Well, again, we're not every
Christmas?
other Wednesday, we're the first and the third Wednesdays.
Oh, okay.
So the next one after that would be January 1st, which we probably don't want to meet on,
Right, so
right?
maybe we need to,
So-
Maybe January 2nd? Can we do a Thursday, or?
I don't know about this room.
Yeah.
or we meet
remember-
the 18th and skip the 1st.
Yeah, maybe that's the thing.
Yeah, I would think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we should keep the 18th.
Skip the
I'm not
1st.
available on the 18th.
I would be
What
happy
time is
to,
that?
maybe you and I could talk, or
Yeah.
you and anybody else, we could talk it all through, so I could present your thoughts
Sure.
on things for that.
Yep.
Or I mean, yeah, email.
So 18th
I
is-
really shouldn't be conversing in email.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean, to have it read here as
I
though
can
you're
type
here.
something out and give it to Sally.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Not sending
Yeah.
an email.
Yeah, no, that's what I
Yeah,
meant.
yeah.
That's what I meant, like send it, yeah.
And I could look into whether or not we could meet on the 2nd, which is a Thursday. Because remember, our last meeting, when I missed a date for posting, and everybody in town hall, I mean, people here scrambled so that we could meet on that Thursday
But we had to do
instead.
it the hour earlier.
We had to do it an hour earlier. So maybe there is a way to do it. So we can decide that at our next meeting.
But are we at the senior center next time?
Yes, we're alternating, so yeah, next
Okay.
time we'll be at the senior center.
Oh, I'm glad you told us.
And I would not be able to make the 2nd for whatever it's worth.
I'm not available on the 18th, so
Do you want to do the same thing, put your thoughts down and send them to her
I'd
just
probably
to?
do that, yeah, because I think it's done, yeah.
So, and on the 2nd, Fawn's not available. I think I'll wait to even look into it. Well, but then we're bumping up and down. I'll see, I'll ask between now and our next meeting whether the 2nd is a possibility. Okay. Is there stuff that I've not touched on that you feel I've missed that we need to talk about still tonight?
The only comment that I would suggest, if I may, if it seems like the direction we're heading is to be vague with this description for the recall, I think it would be important for us then to perhaps shift our focus just a little bit and make absolutely certain that we include anything that we don't want that's to be a qualifying event for, such as the vote. So if there's anything else that we feel that this recall petition should not be used for, now's our chance to put it in there. If we're going to be vague with the violations, let's be very specific with what doesn't qualify.
Smart. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Do I have, and I have packets from our November 21 meeting for anybody who'd like it. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
No,
Second. Everybody, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mike.
For accommodating me.